What would my commercial be about? Who said that? Where's that person? I need to see their hand. Well, a big part of fundraising is being able to bring exhibits. People often say, what did you do with all that money? Well, we did build a new wing. We hope to build another new wing, but many of our donations, our gifts, our garden party, go for our programs. And this is a big part of our programs, are our exhibits. We always aim to have museum quality work here, and I really have to thank our curator, Catherine Bergman. Phenomenal curator. So all of your funds, whenever anyone gives us money, goes directly to this organization to help with the adult education, youth education, all of our classes, our exhibits. And we thank you all very much. Tonight, we thank the Friends of the Island. Oh, I'm sorry. We'll try and get you guys some chairs.
We have some more coming.
We have some more coming.
Yes.
We'd like to thank the Friends of the Island. When I realized that Caladisi was one of the 3 islands, I called them and said, you've all got to come. How many Friends of the Island are here? Let me see your hands.
Yeah.
Wasn't that wonderful how we fought the governor? That night I stood in line with the what? The paper said like 400 people. What were there? Over 1,000. Yes. And you know, this art center, we have the pleasure always of having Sid and Tell, one of our original founders. And this goes back, we've been running since 1974. And we thank you all very much for being here and for having this wonderful organization. This was brought to us by our giving circles, all the members who are members of, we have 4 now, Circle 100, directors, presidents, and founders. If anybody's interested how to be a member, speak to me. But I see members here from all levels, and I thank you all very much. Now, Catherine Bergman, you're on. Thank you.
I always like to group this, it gives me confidence. So welcome everybody. Of course, as always, it's an honor and an exciting night to have our artists with us, and for all 3 shows, we have Bill and his wife Babette down from Maine, Aydelette is here with Tom from Sarasota, and all of the artists that participated and submitted for the Castaway. So thank you everybody for coming. I think this work is made for this gallery. I think it belongs in this gallery. Bill drove down on, I guess, Wednesday and brought the work to us Thursday. I've been out of town, and Ann and I set about to install the show. But I was introduced to Bill's work by receiving a postcard, and this was a couple of years ago. I saw this beautiful imagery, these glacial and craggy rock images, and it's in 3 islands, and I was reading more closely, and there, the 3rd island was Caladisi. So I said, we must have Bill come here. We must bring the show here. So what an amazing contrast between the volcanic scape of Iceland and then the coastal island of Maine. So I'm going to do a brief intro of Bill here, and then he's going to speak for about 20 minutes. Then Aydelette will share about her exhibit, Others Elsewhere. And then at the end, we will have time for questions and answers. So Bill hails from Maine, and he has a varied background. And I just learned that he was once a creative manager of public television station. That was one of his first stints, and he is also a university professor. He taught at the University of Maine. And in addition to photography, he is versed in a variety of media. So the manipulative media, drawing, painting. So Bill, please come up and tell us about your work. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. Great, and what a great place to come to. I've been coming to Calabasas Island for about 8 years, and it's just a spectacular place. And Kathy McCarthy has said about everything that you said about me. I usually, when I'm in front of a camera, nothing talks back, so it's kind of nice. But this is a little scary for me, but we'll get over that. I've been working in the art field for too many years, but many, many years. And in the early days, my work was very different than it is now. And I was a painter. I got my MFA from Penn State, and I did a lot of work. But I also taught photography when I was at Penn State. So I was on an assistantship, and I was one of the few people who actually had some doctoring experience and could work with the students there. Photography has always been something that I've done. But painting was something that was important to me because I could get more of a scale for what I wanted. And it wasn't until digital photography began to take place that I could begin to produce things at a scale that I felt was a relationship. And it's funny I say that because if I wanted to, just fill out this. One of my favorite pieces, when I went to art school in Boston, and spent a lot of time at the Gardner Museum and the Fulton Museum, in the Boston Museum of Art, every lunch time. I would spend my time there. And I'm getting back to size. In the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, I don't know if anyone's ever been there, it's a beautiful museum. And they used to let you come in and eat your lunch there, and things. But it was a great opportunity. And in her dressing room, on her table, there was a little Giorgione painting that sits on the table. And the size was just perfect. And that's what I always thought. A gorgeous thing. And she always had a little dish of violets in front of it. The museum to this day still does that. And that was when I first began to realize there was something about size that was very important to what she did. Sometimes you want to do something really huge, and other times you want to do something really tiny. And so, I don't know where I was going with that. But anyway, digital photography, the whole world of digital work, began to make an enormous change in what we could produce ourselves. In the times before this, we were working in a darkroom, and as poor artists, we didn't have the machinery to do the work that you might want to do. When you put something in the enlarger only takes a certain size piece of film. And I used sheet film, I used all that. But even so, we're still doing it 8 by 10s generally. So I was very anxious to do something that was larger. So most of the painting I did was larger. And it was a good background for what I do now, in that my whole investigation was on composition. My first probably 8 years at Penn State was, why do we have to have composition? There must be some way to destroy the composition and just forget it. And so I ended up doing color field paintings, large format, almost all square, because I decided that if it was square, it couldn't go in any one direction. It had to be right there. And I worked very closely with very subtle colors and geometric shapes. From there, I learned about George Burke, who produced a little pamphlet called Chance Imagery, and it was at the time of John Cage and his music. And I began to realize, well, sometimes it's not the pieces that you want. Sometimes you want something to be more random and flowing. And so I began painting with an airbrush, and just dots and color fields. And that was great. I had some pretty good success with that, but then the kids came along. You've been doing other things. We continue painting, but not quite as actively. And it's a little harder and harder to get canvases that are 7 or 8 feet and work that way. So, and then of course, then the necessity of jobs come about. So, some teaching. And as Catherine said, I was creative manager at the local public television station for me. And I always said, no, I was head of all creation. So we did all kinds of fun things there. We did sets, we did openings for shows, we did all that. And one of the things that I remember the most is that this was in the 1980s, and people were, all the networks were getting really fancy with some kind of digital stuff on air. We didn't have anything like that. They were taking their logos, CBS flying in from the side, and photo show. Before that, things were very simple. In some ways, I like the simple life, but this became pretty dramatic for us all to look at it. And so we sat down and we said, what can we do? We don't have the digital pieces. We're just beginning to look at computers. We don't even have any of that. So we had to devise ways that we could compete in a digital age. And I remember I used to have do the photography. We had a big stack camera, which is a camera that just reproduces in black and white. And so we made some big logos in black and white, and we used color keys in the background so that we could pull the color out of the camera. And then we attached the logo to a broom. Stood there in the dark and swung it into the camera. And we used that for about 3 years. Like the digital works, but it doesn't. So you have to devise ways to accomplish those things. When digital photography came along, it was a shock to me. The first camera I bought was a 1 megapixel. People leave. Do some printing on the computer and do that. I don't want to take a lot of time to review this, but I remember going to a conference where someone from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and they gave this was a public television conference, and they gave a talk on space photos. And all of it was fantastic. We've seen photos from space. I'm thinking maybe NASA's the best photographer in the world. Look at these things, they're just spectacular. And so I asked the question, how do you get these? The rocket ship goes up there and it takes a picture. What happens? How do you get that picture back to Earth? And they said, oh, we don't do it that way. It's not film, it's just numbers. It's just numbers. Okay, that's good. So nobody followed up, and I was sort of left with my mouth open and said, what's the number? And later on, I would say that I met him in a lobby, but it was in a bar. I met him. He was sitting drinking. We all had to drink at that point. And I said, you got to tell me more about this. What do you mean it's just numbers? And so we began to explain how a computer looked at this. And I kept saying, how do you know then that you got the color? And he said, because we've tested it. We've tested it on things that we know what the color is. And we've built these sensors that will record these numbers. And when we pull that together, you get a photograph. And he said, the signal comes down from space, and it goes right to our computers, and we can print out these photos. I'm thinking, I was saying, wow, this is fantastic. So when the first digital cameras came out, I was thinking, maybe this is real. Actually, what I said to him is, if you can do that in film, can't you make the person move? And I'm beginning to worry about the government. Maybe they've got us all on film, and they can make us say things. But no, it's just flat. I got involved in digital photography and making that work, and I used simple cameras to begin with, And you know, people always say, what kind of camera do you use? And it's sort of like when I was painting, they'd say, what brush do you use? It doesn't much matter. When I was in Boston, I had a group of tough teenagers. Somebody asked me if I would look at the teenagers there, and what could I do? And I said, I don't know what I can do. And they said, well, there are about 12 of them. They're kind of getting into trouble with the gangs. What can we do? And I said, well, let's do photography. And I said, how much money you got? We can buy them all cameras. Oh, we don't have any money. I said, okay, just give me a place that we can do some fun prints. So we did. We had a little janitor's closet. We sealed it off and put a red light in it. And first we did contact prints, and we put your hand on something, throw a bunch of leaves on, put some lights on it, and then put it in some developer, and you can process that print. And it was exciting. It's still exciting to me when I see a real print come up in developer and it starts to rise up and you see that print. There's something spectacular about it. And so they did that, and then after a while they kind of got tired. They put everything they could on paper and didn't know what to do. I said, okay, why don't we make cameras? And so we took oatmeal boxes and we made a pinhole camera. Got a hole in the front of it, and we made it the back so you could put a piece of film on there. And I said, you have to be really careful out there. You've got to hold it very still. It's going to take a long time. We'll practice with exposures. And so they went out, and they came back the next week, and they brought their film, and I told them how to keep it so that no light would get at it, and they could get it enough. And we began to process the film, and it was amazing. They couldn't believe it. They could see their friends, and I could see their friends too. And I was thinking, whoa, they need to change friends. But it was so impressive. We had a little show. We cut up the photos, and these young people just had the best time of their life. And they got into something that they never would have gotten into. And that's what I see here. I see all kinds of activity happening that makes it just a really special and great place. But anyway, these photographs, get away from all that. These photographs are a collection. When I first started, I think the first photographs were from Bailey Island and Mount Desert Island. And that was the beginning. And then I discovered Calavisi. I didn't discover Calavisi. Actually, my wife discovered it. We were staying at the Hilton when I was taking care of my uncle, and he had Alzheimer's, and so somebody needed to watch him, and she would go in the morning and walk and run on the beach, and each morning she'd go a little further and a little further, and this is Clearwater Beach. And so one morning she came back and she said, do you know there's a state park down the end of there? And I said, no. And she said, you've got to go see this. It's really beautiful down there. And so she sat Uncle Judd and I started off. And that was the first time I ever saw it. And the minute, and I still do it that way. I don't take the boat over. Once or twice I've taken the boat over. But I like to walk down Clearwater Beach because you kind of slowly leave the rest of the world. And you get down there and you go by that side. And it's nice. They've got some benches. I'm pretty tired sometimes when I get down there, carrying cameras and equipment. And you get down there, and it's always beautiful. I've been there in the rain. I've been there in the fog. I didn't know Florida had fog. Sure enough, they do. And it's great. And it's peaceful, and it's nice, and you can sit there and always do. Because what I do, my background in photography was based on some of Minor White and some of the folks that were doing the zone system. And they set up ways that you could pre-visualize what it was you wanted. So that when I look at a scene, I'm there and I know ahead of time what I'm thinking I want to see. You know, whether I want the clouds to be darker, whether I want the water to be hard and soft or smooth and flowing. And I assess all of that ahead of time. Then I take about 1,000 photos of the same thing over and over again, which gives me a great opportunity to, which you could never do on film. Or you could do it, but you'd go broke with the film. And And this way I can erase what I don't want. But then by pre-visualizing, I have a pretty clear idea as to what I'm looking at in the end. And so then I take the photos, and usually they sit on my computer for a number of weeks and months, and then I go back. Because that's a second opportunity for me to look at it and say, that was what I was looking at, or where was I? That wasn't the right way to go. And I'm able to sort through and look at it. And I did the same thing everywhere I go. I kind of know when I'm looking what I want to look at and what I want to see and build. One of the things, I'm waiting for some, one of the things I do, and I've learned to do early in my painting, and what my objectives were to look at how to make a two-dimensional surface be an actual object. So, and I don't want to get too far into that, but I'm not doing a picture when I'm doing these. I'm looking at the construction of that and how the composition will piece together, and how when you look at it, you're going to travel around. I call it reading the reading. You're gonna read that image in a certain way. And so you can all read it the way you think you want to read it, but in my mind, I've helped direct you, and I've kept you within that surface, which is making that image something that's an object, rather than running off into another direction. Anyway, that's probably not anything you want.
No.
So we have a chance to have questions afterwards. Oh, we've got more to talk. Thank you. Great.
So we have a little more time to discuss and ask your questions to both Aydelette and Bill. And then, of course, we'll have the rest of the evening and you can see these folks out. But I am thrilled to welcome Aydelette Kelsey. I know Aydelette through, we've been privileged to have Aydelette as a teacher here at the Art Center. She's worked with both adults and the children's program. She also has a very diverse background. She's a designer and she is a writer, a wonderful writer. Please be sure that you pick up her program and read the text that accompanies her images in the adjacent gallery. And I hope you enjoy the way that Aydelette chose to display her work. They are frameless pieces, and they are the voluptuousness of looking, as expressed by poet Wallace Stevens. Welcome.
I'm so glad I get a microphone. That's the best thing. I really love these photographs. They couldn't be more different than what you'll see at tonight, but they're just gorgeous. I think they're gorgeous. And they are very painterly. I think that's something that I hadn't really put together until you spoke of your background. They're beautiful. I want them. And I also want to be there. As Catherine said, I went back and forth since I was a child between wanting to be a visual artist and wanting to be a writer. And as I've gotten older and realized I have absolutely nothing to say, I've settled on visual art much more comfortably and happily. And I also started as a nature photographer more than a photographer of people. It's only recently that I've turned my camera to people. In fact, I used to go to great lengths to have no people in my photographs. It was the last thing I was interested in doing. And I look at these photographs and I think maybe I should go back. But I can't. I mean, and I think that's true for everyone. You go where you have to go. And I can say a lot of things about the photographs that I love. And I did at one point realize, partly from a little book called The Dogs of Paris, which was a collection of photographs of people and their dogs by the great photographers of the 20th century in Paris. And I really recommend it. It's a beautifully curated little book. But I realized that the photographs that I kept wanting to go back to were photographs of people. And that the photographs I wanted to pin up in front of my desk were photographs of people. So I thought, well, there's something to this, and I started taking photographs of people. When I was coming here tonight trying to think whether I had anything at all to say to you, it occurred to me, because I'm reading a book called The Anthologist about poetry, that photography is the poetry of visual art, whereas painting is the novel of the visual arts. I think paintings take a long time and require a great deal of attention span. And I think maybe these photographs break that down. I think these are, when I say they're painterly, I think they also speak a great deal of time, and you could look at them for a very long time. I think the photographs I'm taking these days are much more like Bresson's, the moment, pictures of a moment. And it's a false dichotomy. It's not a clean dichotomy, obviously. But I do think that mostly what I would say about them is that I have nothing to say about them. That they are not images I want to talk about or put words to, and that if they invoke stories for you, that makes me happy. And I can't deny that they have invoked some stories for me as well. But I don't want to talk about those stories because I think the faces, the bodies, the gestures are in and of themselves just so poignant, so transitory, so momentary. And there's just nothing beyond them that I want to add. Does that make sense? So that's it. I don't have to say anymore. You can ask questions.
Thank you. So how do we want to do this, guys? Come on back up, Bill, and if anyone from the audience has anything that you'd like to ask either artist or host. And if you need the mic, I'm happy to.
I'd like to ask Bill. I think you almost answered my question because I'm looking at this particular photo and I'm thinking, how long did he sit there till he got what he got? But you're saying that you go back over them in weeks and months, so then it really tells me the answer. You take a million and you find it.
And many of them are so close in the book. I take probably 30 in maybe 10 minutes. And so that then I do have, I have a way of saying, okay, now I like this dark hole and I like the way these pieces, I like this way to go to the, so you're right.
So you make your decisions.
I make the decisions.
Yeah, wonderful.
So, but it begins very quite psychology. I've never seen these guys. It felt like black and white, and I shoot in raw. Yeah, so it's sort of like the astronaut photos. They are all numbers, and so that I can choose not to have color in the photo. Is that for me? See, you should be standing up here.
You mentioned that you use digital cameras. You also use your computer
Yes.
to exercise and get and enhance these images.
Yes.
If so, what software programs do you use? Like Photoshop or
I'm using Photoshop, and I shoot in RAW. I shoot it in RAW, and I use Photoshop. And when you shoot in RAW, the image has a converter to it. So in Photoshop, when I call up the file, it wants to convert that image so that I can see it because it's all numbers. And then I have the options to change exposure. I can do anything at that point. And the value of shooting in RAW is that you're changing the numbers. You're not changing the pixels. So that you can hold the quality of the image. Does that answer your question?
This is a question for both of you. Do you, now I'll let you guys get up and answer this. Do you plan your pictures and go out and sit and take your 30? Or do you walk by, boy, this would really look nice, and I take my 30? So is it opportunistic? Or is it well planned? I'll be out there for 30 because this is what I'm going to get.
It's both. I talk about Rick a little. I really believe in the randomness of all things. And generally, if I'm seeing something that I'm just so excited about, I make myself turn around. Because usually there's something better behind me. and oftentimes that's what happens. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's not that it's, the golden hour is a wonderful time to go out and take photographs. It's not necessarily the time I choose. Sometimes it's necessary.
Mine probably more opportunistic, although I'll find a beautiful background, and there's nothing I'd like better than to sit and watch people pass and turn that background and respond to me sitting there on the camera.
Given the history of photographic imaging, for instance, if we see a picture,
This is going to be a hard question.
if we see a photograph of Abraham Lincoln, we're very impressed. We look at that and we say, like, wow, there's certainly less than 100 of those. And then Kodak put a camera in everybody's hands, and Polaroid made them instant. And now we have cell phones taking pictures everywhere. In digital, what's next? What comes after? We've gone from photographs that have to be worked through a process, digital that comes right now, and then we look and pick and choose. What are you going to do next?
I never know what I'm going to do next. Right now, I look at projects. I look at, for instance, what I did here in terms of islands didn't happen. I didn't say, I'm going to find 3 islands and do this. I happened to be at Bailey Island, and I liked what it did. And my wife found Calavisi, and I liked what it did. And then we went to Iceland, and it wasn't until I was back in Calavisi that I was walking out, and I was sitting under that osprey nest out there. There's a little bench in the trees there, and this guy came along. He said he was elderly like I am, and he said, "Do you mind if I sit down?" And I said, "No." And he had a camera, and he said, "I'm taking photographs of birds." And I said, "Oh, that's a nice idea." And I said, "I'm just going to take the photographs." And we showed each other that we both had a digital camera. You could see each took. And he said, "Gee, I'll put that together in a show called Islands." And I said, "Well, that's funny because I've got Island. My wife and I have been talking about that." He was Trevor, and he was from London, and he comes every year here. And so that's how that happened. It wasn't that I thought, gee, I'm going to do this next. Right now I'm working on a series that I call Beneath the Surface. And there are a lot of things that I've been taking during the winter of ice and elements so that it's a more layered thing. These are really when I begin to think about it. And I guess I'm going to try to answer your question in this way. It's very easy to say what you're doing when you're doing it. And then when it's done, it's easy to say, this is what I did. And I think, you go 4 or 5 years and you look at it and say, oh no, this is what I did. And that keeps growing. And so I think that's what happens. And so as I do something else, or as any of us do something else, if I knew what the next process was, I'd get a patent right quick. But I don't think you do. I think you wander through. I think, I can't imagine doing anything but digital imaging right now. But I wouldn't have imagined that that's what I was doing when I was painting. pretend you got a...
Well, I would just say that what's next, some 20-year-old is going to conquer what's next in terms of process, in terms of technology. And what's next for me or for you is whatever we have right in front of us that we're working on. No, I'm not spending any time sitting around wondering what the next camera's going to do. But I mean, I'm aware that somebody just bought this image thing for $1 billion. You know, Facebook just bought them. And my niece sends me those pictures all the time, and I suddenly thought her pictures got a lot better, but it was because they were coming through that thing. I mean, there are things coming. There's a camera now that you don't have to set your depth of field until after you look at the picture. Or you can pick different depths of field, you know. And I see no use for that for myself. But somebody who's new to photography is going to see it for the first time with that choice, and is going to do something with it that none of us in this room probably could think of, except maybe, I don't know, somebody maybe. But you know what I mean? It's not, does that answer your question?
Can I, one other thing, I don't think the technology creates the art. And so I don't think whatever it is going to change what art is. And I'm not going to tell you what art is because I don't. So, but I do think that that's important to remember. It isn't the camera. I didn't get far enough along on that point. I was trying to think it isn't the camera that makes it. It's not the brushes. But it's also wonderful about what people want and what the future is. When you mentioned Abraham Lincoln, it was fantastic to look at those Matthew Brady photos. They're frightening to see what happened. And I've been a sucker all my life. And then it said, I just went to Europe and I've got some slides. Want to look at them? Yeah. I'm the one who says, oh yeah, I want to look at those. I love that. I like seeing people. I like seeing them elected. I think that's the way it's going to be in the future.
I think we had one more question back here.
When you're taking pictures of people, do you ask their permission or?
That's a really good question, and it's a sticky point. It depends a lot on the culture that I'm in. The first few days I'm in a place, I walk around with my camera and I don't shoot people, but I shoot other things, and I watch the way people react to me and my camera. And in some places, people are very interested. And if I just sort of swing the camera around toward them, they smile and pose. And something, so I kind of get a sense from that of the attitude of the culture toward photography. And if people are that way, then I don't hesitate to steal photographs wherever. But there are other places I've been, lots of places in South America where it's an insult to take a photograph of someone without getting permission. And in those places, I'm really good at making eye contact with people, pointing to my camera and pointing to them, and then sort of doing a negotiation, because lots of times people go, you know, so you can do a sort of negotiation with people, and those, I try to be respectful of people's desires. I also take a lot of pictures of people without faces, so I don't have to worry about it. So I take pictures of bodies or things like that, too.
You can hold it. The next one's for you.
I've looked at the rocks here and some of the other pictures, and I'm saying I've never been a place quite like that. How did you get there? We must have some other abilities other than pictures.
Well, so I do get myself into places that I probably shouldn't be. But that was it. Anybody can go there. That's the giant staircase on Bailey Island in Maine. And supposedly, the opposite of that is on the Irish coast, and it's a product of the tearing apart of the continents. Yeah, so that's and one of the things that I didn't say, most of these are about change. All of these, in fact, most of my life is about recognizing that everything changes. And so this particularly is about the fact that volcanoes make land.
I think especially more about how did you get to take that shot? Where were you?
I was at the head of the stairs, and I balancing and making sure that I was up there at the time. Actually, I didn't make, telephoto, no. No, it was actually, I think that was with my R1, my Sony R1, which has a fixed lens on it. It does have some telephoto ability, but I was going to say I was careful not to be there when the waves were crashing over it, but my wife would tell you I'm not that careful. No, that's in Maine. But I mean, I haven't been to the one in Ireland, but I'd like to go and take.
You might as well.
So you're not really Spider-Man?
I'll tell you, some of the time, you do get into trouble. I was thinking, like in Iceland, when I was taking the waterfall photo, I had been careful with the photo, with the camera that I was using. I brought the R1 there too, because it's a fixed lens, and I didn't know what I was going to get into, snow and water. And I kept taking photos there, and pretty soon I was saying, gee, everything seems so foggy, so cloudy. And finally I looked at the lens and it was all iced over. So I put the camera under my coat and let it roll off. But you could get into trouble.
Well, everyone, I think what we're going to do is go ahead and enjoy the evening, and you can seek out Bill and Aydelette and have a personal conversation. Thank you both for